The rain had begun hours before I left the office, each drop tapping against the car roof like a faint, unrelenting reminder that nothing in life was entirely under control. I had texted her around 6, a simple message. "I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up." Nothing more. A routine text, one I had sent countless times over the years, and yet tonight the words felt heavier than usual, loaded with the unspoken tension I hadn't yet allowed myself to confront. The streets were slick, the headlights reflecting off puddles and fractured shards of silver and gold. I drove slowly, letting the car ease into the rhythm of the storm, the wipers sweeping back and forth in a mechanical heartbeat. My thoughts wandered, unbidden, to the small details of our apartment. How the living room smelled faintly of lavender and cleaning spray, how her hair caught the light in the mornings, the soft curve of her hands as she reached for her coffee. I had loved those hands once, or so I told myself. I wasn't sure anymore. As I turned the corner onto our street, the wind picked up, rattling the car windows and carrying the distant sound of sirens and barking dogs. The apartment block came into view, dark and unassuming, a shadow against the gray sky. I noticed the faint glow of light spilling from the window of our living room, a warm, golden rectangle that contrasted with the storm outside. I slowed, not yet fully conscious of why my stomach had tightened, why the air seemed thicker and heavier. The car idled as I looked closer, and then, without thinking, I saw the movement inside. Not the familiar silhouette of my wife reading, or the slow, precise motion of her preparing dinner. Something else. Someone else. A figure, taller than me, leaning in ways I did not recognize, touching her in ways I should not imagine. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel, the leather pressing into my palms, and I realized my heart was hammering in a strange, panicked rhythm. I could not look away. The rain ran down the windshield in rivulets, distorting the scene, as if nature itself was trying to soften the blow of what my eyes were recording. I blinked, hoping it was a trick of shadow and light, that the storm had made the window shimmer oddly. But no. The movements were deliberate, intimate, familiar in the way that made my chest tighten with nausea. I wanted to slam the accelerator, run into the parking lot and demand answers, but my legs felt rooted, my mind spinning through every possible explanation and landing on none. The figure laughed softly. The sound carried faintly through the closed window, and I recognized her voice before I knew I had heard it. Elena. My wife. And behind her, someone whose face I did not yet know, but whose presence now seemed to hollow out the room around her. I drove past, unwilling to stop, but unable to detach. The image clung to my mind, flashing across the contours of my memory in fragmented snapshots. The way her hair fell against his chest, the curve of her shoulder pressing into his hand, the subtle tilt of her head that had once leaned only against me. The rain fell harder now, striking the windshield with a violent rhythm, as if the world were trying to drown the sight I had seen before it could root itself in reality. My eyes stung, though I wasn't sure if it was from the rain or from the sudden, sharp pain settling in my chest. I drove slowly, circling the block, my hands trembling slightly, my mind running over every moment that had led me here. The late nights, the missed calls, the quiet withdrawal I had chalked up to work stress. I had ignored the subtle signs, the slight distance that had begun creeping between us, because I had convinced myself that love, steady and unremarkable, didn't need constant reassurance. But the truth had been there, unspoken, silent and patient, waiting for the moment my eyes could no longer be blind. Pulling into the parking spot beneath the flickering street lamp, I sat for a long moment in the car, the engine ticking as it cooled. I stared out at the window again, trying to reconcile the intimacy I had witnessed with the years of trust and quiet affection that had defined us. My mind raced, picturing every conversation, every touch, every promise I had made. Did she always carry this duplicity with her? Was it a recent thing? Or had I been blind for years, threading my way through a house that now seemed to contain secrets I had never been invited to share. The rain drummed insistently, a relentless counterpoint to the storm churning inside me. I found myself imagining the mundane details of what was happening inside, the softness of the couch beneath them, the sound of their laughter, the smell of her perfume mixing with the unknown scent of the other man. It was banal and devastating all at once, the ordinariness of betrayal magnifying its cruelty. Finally, I forced myself out of the car, boots splashing in shallow puddles as I walked toward the building. The cold air hit my face, sharp and raw, and I drew my jacket tighter around me. Each step toward the entrance felt heavy, weighted with a mixture of dread and inevitability. My hands, slick with rain, fumbled with the keys, my fingers brushing the familiar metal in a trembling rhythm. The door was slightly ajar, a detail that struck me as odd but not yet alarming. I pushed it gently, and the scent of her apartment hit me immediately, a mix of candles, old books, and the faint underlying scent of something else that made my stomach turn. The living room lay partially in shadow, the glow of the overhead light illuminating only fragments of the space. And then I saw them again, closer now, and it was as if the air itself had thickened, trapping me in a tableau I could neither unsee nor escape. I stood frozen for a heartbeat, the sound of rain tapping on the windows blending with the low hum of a heater. She turned slightly, and our eyes met for the briefest instant. I saw the recognition, the hesitation, the small flicker of guilt, but it was buried beneath something else. Calm, almost casual, a practiced composure that felt foreign and alien. The other man's hand lingered on her back, a gentle, intimate touch, and I felt my chest tighten so severely that I thought I might collapse. It was not anger yet, not fully. It was disbelief, the kind that renders thought sluggish and fragmented. I wanted to speak, to demand, to scream, but my voice had dissolved somewhere between my mind and my lips. I wanted to retreat, to turn away and deny the reality before me, but my legs had become conduits of a silent, unwavering need to witness the truth in its rawest form. I remember the silence that followed. Not complete, of course. The rain outside continued, and there were the muffled sounds of movement, the soft creak of the couch springs, the quiet murmur of her voice speaking to him. But inside me, the silence was absolute, heavy, a pressure that pressed down on my chest. I could feel my pulse in my temples, in my ears, a deafening accompaniment to the quiet betrayal. My mind raced over questions I had never dared to ask aloud, questions about the years, the trust, the intimacy we had shared, and that now felt like a fragile, hollow shell. I felt the urge to touch her, to remind myself that she was still my wife. But the thought recoiled in horror at what my touch might mean now, how it might feel contaminated by the scene I had just witnessed. I wanted to turn and run, to drive away and erase the image from my memory, but the image had already etched itself into every corner of my perception. I moved closer to the window, careful to stay in the shadows, letting the rain obscure the view, letting the night lend me some measure of anonymity. I wanted to catalog every detail, as if by understanding it fully, I could somehow reclaim control over a reality that had slipped through my fingers. The curve of her jaw, the way her hair fell across her neck, the casual leaning against him that suggested comfort, intimacy, familiarity, all these details burned into my mind. The smell of rain mixed with the faint scent of cologne, a subtle but distinct reminder of another presence. I wanted to believe it was a one-time thing, a mistake, a lapse, but the ease with which she moved suggested otherwise. I felt my chest tighten further, a slow, creeping ache that felt like it would never dissipate. I remembered the way we had met, the quiet Sunday afternoons in the cafe, the laughter that seemed to come so easily, the warmth that had spread through me when she had first touched my hand. How many times had I imagined this very apartment filled with our happiness, and yet here it was, filled with something I could not yet name, a quiet betrayal, a slow, methodical unraveling of everything I had thought secure. I leaned my forehead against the glass, feeling the cold seep through the window. as if the night itself was pressing against my skin, reminding me that nothing remained unchanged, nothing safe, nothing untouched by the storm now raging both outside and inside me. I had imagined 1,000 confrontations, 1,000 ways in which this might play out, but now that it had happened, I found myself incapable of movement, speech, decision. I was a spectator, and yet the stakes were everything. Time seemed to stretch, elongate, distort. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the glass, wind rattling the frames. I could hear the faint sound of thunder, distant yet insistent, echoing the drumbeat of my thoughts. I wondered how long they had been like this, how long she had allowed herself this duplicity, and what small, imperceptible shifts in her behavior I had missed. Every glance, every smile, every casual touch over the years now felt potentially laden with hidden meaning, every memory tinged with suspicion. I felt a nausea rise, a twisting knot in my stomach that refused to be soothed by reason. The quiet betrayal was far more potent than any loud confrontation could have been. It was subtle, persistent, and far more human. It was a betrayal that did not need spectacle, for the intimacy itself was the spectacle, and I was trapped in it, unwilling, unable, and yet completely conscious of every detail. I stepped back from the window, my reflection blurred against the pane, the storm outside mirroring the storm within. The car keys in my pocket felt heavier now, as if burdened with the knowledge of what had occurred. I wondered, not for the first time, how it had come to this, how love, patient and persistent, could coexist with secrecy and desire for another. I felt a strange dissociation, observing my own reactions as if they were happening to someone else. Anger had begun to seep in at the edges, mingling with grief, disbelief, and a profound sense of loss. I realized I could not confront her yet, not in this state, not in the raw, unprocessed intensity of what I had seen. There was no script, no guide for this moment, only the immediate, suffocating clarity that my life had shifted irreversibly. The rain slowed, tapering to a steady drizzle, but the storm inside me remained. I stood there in the half-light, watching, listening, feeling the weight of years of trust and shared moments collapse under the quiet pressure of what had been revealed. I could feel the ache in my chest spreading down to my stomach, a hollow, persistent hurt that seemed to extend through every limb. I wanted to leave, to retreat to the sanctuary of the car, to the familiar hum of the engine and the isolation it provided. And yet I could not move, could not leave. My eyes remained fixed on the window, on the quiet movements within, on the intimate choreography of betrayal that unfolded with every passing second. Hours seemed to pass, though perhaps it was only minutes. I observed the small details, the way her hand brushed against his, the tilt of her head as she spoke softly, the gentle sighs that punctuated the room. Each moment carved itself into memory, unrelenting, precise, undeniable. I thought of the conversations we had had, the promises whispered in the dark, the plans we had made together, and I felt a wave of loss so profound that it left me numb. I realized painfully that nothing would ever be the same again, that this night, this storm, had changed the trajectory of everything I had believed about us. My mind swirled with questions, with scenarios, with a desperate need to understand why, and yet the answers seemed both simple and impossible, grounded in human desire and weakness, and yet utterly alien to the life I had thought we shared. The night pressed in on me from all sides. The darkened streets, the relentless rain, the flickering light from the window, the quiet hum of life continuing as if nothing had occurred. I felt the weight of time, the slow accumulation of choices and actions that had led to this singular, devastating tableau. I remembered the way we had argued about small things, the late nights I had worked, the moments when distance crept quietly between us. All those moments, all those tiny fractures, seemed to have coalesced into this night, this image, this unbearable clarity. I wanted to scream, to break something, to leave a mark on the world that mirrored the mark left upon me. And yet I did nothing, standing there in the drizzle, watching, witnessing, absorbing, my own humanity unfolding in the quiet reflection of betrayal. The car interior awaited, a silent sanctuary, but I could not go to it yet. I lingered on the threshold of the apartment, feeling the rain soaking through my jacket, the wind tugging at my hair, the cold pressing against my skin. I remembered our wedding, the slow dance in the dimly lit hall, the softness of her hand in mine, the promises whispered that night of fidelity, companionship, and shared life. And now, those memories felt fragile, translucent, as if the storm outside had seeped into them, dissolving the certainty they had once offered. I felt the tremor in my fingers, the tightness in my jaw, the slow, insistent ache in my chest, all markers of a truth that had arrived with merciless precision. I finally turned away from the window, stepping back into the street, letting the rain wash over me. I did not look back, could not bring myself to. The apartment loomed behind me, a place that had once felt like home, now heavy with secrets, shadows, and the quiet betrayal of a love I had believed secure. I walked toward the car, boots splashing in the shallow pools, each step measured, deliberate, grounding me in the reality that I now had to inhabit. My reflection caught in the wet asphalt, distorted by the rain and the flickering streetlights, and I realized that the man looking back at me was not the same as the one who had entered this street hours before. Something had shifted irreversibly. Something inside had broken, not loudly, not with clamor, but quietly, intimately, painfully. Sitting in the driver's seat, hands trembling slightly as I gripped the wheel, I allowed myself to exhale, slow and deliberate. The rain continued, now a gentle patter against the roof, and I realized that the storm outside had mirrored the one within, though it would take far longer for the internal storm to settle, if it ever did. I started the engine, the hum filling the quiet, and let the windshield wipers sweep away the last remnants of the night's clarity. But even as I drove away, the image remained, seared into my mind, a permanent shadow that would follow me long after the rain had stopped, long after the streets had dried, long after the apartment block disappeared in the distance. I could not unsee it, could not undo it. And in that quiet, solitary drive through the rain-soaked streets, I realized that this was only the beginning. The drive through the rain-soaked streets felt endless, the city blurring past in streaks of silver and amber under the streetlights. My hands were still trembling on the wheel, knuckles pale against the leather, though I told myself it was fatigue, the storm, the lateness of the hour. But deep down, I knew it was something far heavier, something lodged in the chest like a stone I could not dislodge. I had imagined every kind of confrontation, every furious exchange, but the truth was, I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to plead or demand or humiliate. I wanted to understand, to find some thread of the life I thought we shared and see where it had unraveled. But understanding felt impossible. The betrayal had been so quiet, so ordinary, so achingly human in its casualness, that it cut deeper than any shouted accusation could have. I parked in a side street, engine still running, rain dripping from the roof and pooling on the asphalt. I rested my head against the steering wheel, eyes closed, breathing uneven. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw fragments of the apartment, the way her hair had fallen across his shoulder, the faint warmth of the light spilling through the window, the curve of her hand in his. I had seen many things in my life, but nothing like this. It wasn't a betrayal announced by slamming doors or shouting matches. It was a quiet invasion of intimacy, a subtle claim of affection that should have been mine. And worse, the subtlety made it feel more devastating, because it could have been mistaken for nothing. It could have been erased from memory, ignored, minimized. But my eyes had caught it, had registered it, and the truth could not be unlearned. I drove again, slowly, deliberately, letting the rain guide the rhythm of my thoughts. Each turn, each reflection in the wet streets, brought memories I hadn't realized I had buried. The mornings we had shared, sitting with coffee in silence, her hand brushing against mine absent-mindedly. The evenings we had spent reading or watching old films, where our conversations had been unremarkable yet intimate. The small, almost invisible ways she had trusted me with her presence, with her body, with her laughter. And now, all of it felt suspended in a different light, colored by the knowledge that these moments had not been enough to anchor her loyalty. I wondered how long this had been going on, what small choices had led her here, what quiet decisions had permitted another presence into the intimacy we had cultivated. The streetlights flickered as I passed, and I remembered the first time we had kissed, the warmth and awkwardness, the tentative promise it carried. That memory collided violently with the one from the window, and I felt a sudden, crushing emptiness, a hollowness that made it difficult to even breathe. I thought of her voice, soft and familiar, carrying through the living room, carrying laughter and tenderness, and now tainted with an intimacy that had nothing to do with me. It was not grand or loud or unmissable. It was subtle, quiet, and therefore infinitely more devastating. My mind tried to catalog what I had witnessed, as if by examining each detail I could make sense of it, as if understanding the mechanics of the betrayal could soften its blow. But there was no softening it. There was only the slow, insistent ache that seeped into my muscles, into my thoughts, into the rhythm of my heartbeat. Hours seemed to pass. I stopped somewhere, though I wasn't aware exactly where, the car idling in a near-empty parking lot. I stared out into the storm, rain spattering against the windshield, distorted reflections of neon signs, flickering streetlights, and occasional passing cars. I thought about confronting her, about demanding explanations, about unraveling the truth in words that might never capture the gravity of what I had seen. But even as the thoughts surfaced, a deeper instinct told me to wait, to process, to absorb the depth of the wound before trying to articulate it. I realized that action in this moment would be futile, even destructive. The truth had been revealed. The betrayal had settled into reality. And reality, unlike fantasy, could not be rewritten with pleading or shouting or bargaining. I remembered small gestures, innocuous moments from our daily life that now seemed significant, symbols of an intimacy that might never have been as complete as I had believed. The way she always adjusted my collar when I wore a tie, the soft hum she made while cooking, the careful attention to small details in our home. I realized, with painful clarity, that the very acts that had comforted me were now reminders of absence, markers of distance, symbols of a life that had quietly begun to diverge from mine. The mind is cruel in these moments, replaying memory alongside reality, forcing a comparison that leaves the heart raw. I felt the tension in my shoulders, the tightness in my chest, the subtle trembling that betrayed an internal storm. I did not cry, not yet, but a quiet, pervasive grief had begun to settle over me, unrelenting and uninvited. Hours passed in this quiet torment. I remembered our conversations about trust, about loyalty, about the inevitability of honesty in a shared life. I remembered her laughter, bright and familiar, and now I could not reconcile it with the betrayal I had witnessed. I thought of the mundane evening routines, the simple touches, the casual comfort of coexisting in shared space. All of it had been a foundation, or so I had believed, and yet it now seemed precarious, fragile, a scaffold that had quietly been removed from under me. I thought about the other man, an anonymous intruder whose presence had altered the very fabric of our shared existence. I did not hate him, nor did I particularly fear him. He was incidental, peripheral, almost irrelevant compared to the gravity of what had happened inside the apartment, in the space that had once been sacred between us. I The rain eased into a fine drizzle as dawn approached, pale light filtering through the clouds, washing the world in grey. I drove slowly, aimless, the streets familiar, yet alien. I passed familiar landmarks, the corner cafe where we had met, the small park where we had once sat quietly, the bridge overlooking the river where we had watched sunsets. Each location carried a memory, a layer of intimacy now rendered fragile and brittle. I realized how much of life is constructed on assumptions, on trust, on the quiet acceptance of another person's constancy. And when that trust is removed, or violated, or misdirected, the resulting emptiness is not dramatic, it is ordinary, relentless, and deeply human. I thought of speaking to her finally, of standing in the living room and confronting the quiet devastation I had witnessed. But I also knew that words would be insufficient. Words would stumble, falter, fail. The betrayal had already unfolded, quietly, in gestures and touches, in whispers and shared spaces. Confrontation might provide temporary clarity, but it could not restore the intimacy, the sense of safety, the quiet assurances that had once defined our marriage. I thought of leaving, of walking away into the rain, letting the storm itself carry me from the wreckage of what had been. But even that seemed impossible. I had invested years, heart and body and habit, into a life that had become unrecognizable. At some point, I realized I was heading home. The car moved almost autonomously, drawn by habit, by the gravitational pull of familiarity, by the unresolved need to witness, to understand, to exist within the reality of the apartment that had once been our shared sanctuary. I pulled into the familiar parking spot, boots wet and heavy, coat clinging to my body, hair plastered by the drizzle. The building loomed above me, quiet, indifferent, its windows dark save for the soft glow of the living room. I paused, letting the rain cool my heated thoughts, listening to the steady patter, feeling the air thick with the aftermath of a night that had irrevocably shifted everything. I told myself to breathe, to ground myself, to remember that nothing needed to happen immediately, that the world could wait while I processed the unthinkable. I entered the apartment cautiously, the familiar click of the door echoing differently in my ears, the space carrying a strange, altered weight. It smelled the same, familiar and comforting, yet subtly altered by the presence of absence, by the trace of someone else's presence. I moved slowly through the rooms, each step deliberate, feeling for reminders of the life I thought I had, the life that had been quietly eroded. I remembered the rhythm of our days, the mundane routines that had given shape to our love, and realized that even those routines were now tinged with absence, with the knowledge that they had been shared imperfectly. I found her in the kitchen, not in the intimate tableau of last night, but in casual, quiet preparation of breakfast. The soft light from the window illuminated her profile, and I saw for a moment only her, not the betrayal, not the other man, not the image that had haunted me. She looked up as I entered, eyes meeting mine with a tentative calm, as if nothing had happened, as if our life had continued uninterrupted. And I realized how fragile composure could be, how easily it could mask internal fracture. I felt my chest tighten again, the silent weight of grief pressing down, and I knew that everything had shifted, irreversibly. We exchanged few words, simple, neutral, almost performative. Breakfast was prepared, cups filled, a quiet ritual of domesticity attempting to cover the rupture beneath. I observed her movements closely, noting the ease, the familiarity, the habitual grace that had always drawn me to her. And yet I could not shake the knowledge of what I had seen, could not unsee the quiet betrayal that had unfolded in the window, in the living room, in the intimacy that had once been ours alone. My thoughts wandered constantly, cataloging small details, the tilt of her head, the faint tension in her hands, the subtle hesitations that betrayed unspoken truths. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside remained, persistent and unyielding. Later, I sat in the car again, reflective, staring at the city in the soft light of morning. The streets were wet, still, the storm leaving its quiet signature on the asphalt, on the sidewalks, on the reflections of buildings. I thought about the years we had shared, the quiet accumulation of moments that had defined us, and how they now seemed provisional, contingent, fragile. I realized that the intimacy I had believed secure had always been dependent on choices, on fidelity, on the quiet agreement of presence. And when those agreements were violated, even softly, the rupture was absolute. I felt the ache in my chest spreading further, slow and insistent, a quiet testament to the human capacity for grief, for disappointment, for silent heartbreak. I thought of leaving again, driving away without explanation, dissolving into the anonymity of the city. But I realized that the life we had built, flawed as it was, had bound me in ways that could not be undone by mere distance. I could not escape the memory, the betrayal, the knowledge. I could only inhabit it, process it, and decide, slowly, how to exist with it. The storm outside had ended, but the quiet devastation persisted, a reminder that human hearts are fragile, and that trust, once broken, leaves an indelible mark. As I finally walked back toward the apartment, rain jacket clinging, boots wet, I understood the full weight of what had happened. Betrayal is rarely loud. It is rarely spectacular. It is subtle, quiet, insidious, and profoundly human. It lives in the spaces between words, in the soft glances, in the intimacy shared with someone else, unnoticed until the moment it can no longer be ignored. And now, in the gray morning light, with the city waking quietly around me, I felt that weight, heavy and constant, pressing down with the realization that life had irrevocably shifted. I entered the apartment and paused, taking in the familiar surroundings, the soft light filtering through the blinds, the quiet hum of our home. She looked up, a tentative smile, and I felt a strange ache of recognition, a memory of love that had once been pure, now complicated, fractured, real. I felt the tremor in my hands, the weight in my chest, the quiet ache that spoke of something lost and yet not entirely gone. And in that moment I realized that I would carry this with me, this knowledge, this grief, this quiet betrayal, for a long time, learning slowly how to live with it, how to exist in a world where love is flawed, human, and fragile, and where trust, once broken, changes everything forever.